Okay, welcome to another session of the Everything Service Management podcast with me, Daniel Gilby, and my co-host, as always, Sunil Dougal. Today, we've got a very special guest. Stuart Seymour has joined us. Stuart is the Group CISO at Virgin Media O2. Stuart, great to have you with us. It'd be fantastic if you could give a little introduction to our listeners. Let them know who you are and what you're about, and then we'll get into some questions, if that's okay.
Brilliant. Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Sunil, for having me. Delighted to be here. My name is Stuart Seymour, and I have the privilege to be the Group CISO at Virgin Media O2, which is the second largest telecommunications company in the United Kingdom, further to the merger between Virgin Media on the fixed side and O2 on the mobile side. And as I said, delighted to be here.
Great to have you here.
Good to have you. Shall I kick off, Dan, with question one, as is our tradition?
I think that's just don't want to fool the listeners, do we? Don't want to break from script.
Exactly. But Stuart, let me just echo, great to have you here. Thank you very much for joining us. So I guess the first question really is perhaps just to try and help our listeners understand a little bit more about what your sort of overarching function is for yourself and your team in VMO2. So, the kind of key aspects to your role, the things that hopefully don't keep you up at night, but, keep your brain active and engaged during the day.
Yeah, of course. So my primary focus is our customers, and ensuring that our customers are kept away from harm, be that cybersecurity harm or harm within our stores, our engineers installing equipment, keeping them safe. So it's keeping customers and employees safe from harm, both in the physical realm, but also in the logical realm. So my remit covers physical security, cyber security, governance, risk and assurance, partners with the business, and supports our customers, ensuring that they have seamless connectivity.
So given those things that you've talked about there, and it's very interesting that wouldn't have immediately struck me, the physical realm, as you put it, people going to sites and ensuring that they're safe and so on and so forth. How do you then kind of instill that culture of safety to the teams? What sort of approaches have you found work well? Perhaps what hasn't worked so well? And I guess another question that might be interesting is how is that then kind of measured and monitored to ensure that the objectives you're seeking and the targets you need to meet, whatever they may be, are met and so on? How would you go about that, Stuart? What could you share with us?
So security culture is incredibly important to me. And it's one of the many things that we're very blessed with here at Virgin Media O2. In fact, my awareness and communications function is award-winning, and rightly so. Our thinking behind that is to be educative and not punitive. So it's not security through fear. It's not alarmist. It is educating people to the online risks, and a very deliberate strategy within the tone of communications that we've taken is to center it very much in terms of first of all fun, and second of all, families. And what I mean by the first one, sort of fun. So in launching, for example, our security handbook, which is, a combination of all of our security policies, which are, by nature, potentially quite dry. We launched it as a sort of an Indiana Jones quest with the book that had clues within the handbook, which people then found, and there was a prize, but then it was all very competitive within our own sort of internal social media channels. And that was a great success. We also launched our own security bot, which greatly helps automate and communicate with our employees. But again, in this launch, one of the things that we did is we had a competition to name it. And again, that also drove a sort of a fun and an engaging element. In terms of the engagement thing, we're also really lucky because we have dedicated sort of security channel within our sort of internal social media platform that has around 1,000 active employees that aren't part of the security function, are just active employees. And hence, if ever I do a sort of a phishing test, that community picks it up quicker than anything I've ever seen and very quickly reports it to everyone. And trying to keep the secrecy that there's an activity going on is pleasingly futile, because that community very quickly spreads it between themselves. I've had this really weird thing, has anyone else seen it, etc., etc. So that's kind of the fun, the community. And then the family, one of the things that we sort of have an optic on and focus is teaching. So if I teach you how to keep your daughter safe online, and if I teach you about keeping your mother safe from phishing and what things to look out for, that talks to the heart as well as the head. And that gets you invested. And all I'm teaching you is to look out for things that when you come to work, you then naturally do, because you've spoken to your mum and said, look, mum, these are the things that you need to look out on a phishing email, or this is how I keep my son or my daughter or, my nephew, my godson, whoever, safe online. And then when you come back to work, all that is sort of already instilled in you. One of the things that, in terms of, security culture that traditionally as an industry, we're not brilliant at is finding that other dimension, which isn't alarmist, isn't scaring people, half to death, isn't you're all about to get hacked and all of this sort of thing. And I find that type of engagement, especially security being seen as an enabler and someone who can help you, as opposed to someone who's looking over your shoulder and something that's punitive, has really helped here at Virgin Media O2.
Stuart, can I just ask? Sorry, apologies, Dan. So your remit covers obviously employees within the Virgin Media O2 organisation. Do you have a view on how you also protect or educate, I think is a better word, actually educate your customers, right, in what the safe use of the technology that you enable them with is?
Yeah, no, we do. And we work very closely with our, communications function. Not only do I have an internal communications resources, but we're also plugged in to a much larger and again, award-winning and excellent, external communications functions. So you might have seen a campaign that the communications function are running, which is all about preventing scammers and preventing fraud. And you might have seen Daisy, our AI granny that keeps scammers on the line.
Oh, yes.
And all of that.
Yeah.
To be completely candid, that's kind of all them, and that's the sort of the communications function that do all these things, for the customer. And clearly we sort of feed in and what have you. But that is an area that is not only brilliant in its own right, but very joined up. And of course, we at Virgin Media O2, one of our philosophies is we have our customer very much at heart.
Mm.
I'm a customer.
Mm.
My wife's a customer. My in-laws are customers. So yeah.
I'm also a customer of both broadband provision and mobile provision, so I'm very happy to hear you say all these things, Stuart.
No, brilliant. Which is why the quality of this call is so great.
Excellent. Yeah, exactly. Rock solid on this end. Yeah. Sorry, Dan,
Nice.
I interrupted you before.
No, it's just I was thinking it's a really great approach that you've taken there, because as you pointed out, now security could be seen as a very dry topic, right? And it's a serious topic. And to have that kind of thought process around how can we make this more engaging, and then rolling with that, doing the Indiana Jones kind of thing there, and getting people on board to help name an aspect around it. I think that's really cool, very cool indeed. We'd be very keen to hear what our listeners think of that, so leave a comment. Son, I know you've got a great question coming up for Stuart next, right?
Well, if it's okay, I'm just going to slightly shift the kind of pre-planned order of the questions around a little bit. So sorry to keep you on your toes there, Stuart, but so
No worries.
I mean, this is the Everything Service Management podcast. So, our listeners are traditionally in the main from a service management background. And one of the areas I think that in many organizations has been traditionally difficult has been service management teams and security teams perhaps not collaborating as closely as they could do and arguably should do, right? So I imagine that interface is a significant one for you in your organization. So how do you manage that, when you're talking to your, for example, major incident management teams or, change management teams, you've just done a big, merger of businesses, right? I mean, that must have presented significant challenge. So talk a bit about that.
Yeah. So the key to that for me is going beyond a contractual relationship to one of true partnership. So if I think back to my career, and if I think back to, my time, for example, at Centrica, there was a company that was a service management company that were amazing and went the extra mile for me, and went, when I was in an incident, would be with me, in that trench until the incident got closed. There wasn't any talk of, oh, well, these, extra billable hours, or I'll need to amend the purchase order, I'll need to amend this and that and the other. They were just brilliant, and they just dug in and tucked in with me. And of course, I've moved from Centrica, I moved to British American Tobacco, and now I'm here. And guess what? That company's still with me. Now, I won't say where, because I don't want it to be triangulated, and I won't say who, but conversely, at one point in my career, I was in the middle of an incident and an emergency, and I got very much the contract says, the SLA says,
right, yeah,
and we will get back to you in whatever the SLA says.
Mm-hmm.
And these things are soluble, because you tell me that computer says no, the first, I'm not going to take that during an incident. I'm going to go over your head and over your boss's head and over however far I need to get to till someone tells me yes, articulating the value of the contract, etc., etc. And eventually I'll get there, and eventually someone will help. But guess what? That relationship is utterly soured. And there are companies that I will never, ever, ever use in my life, no matter where I land. And if someone
name three,
no.
But interestingly, also the CISO community is quite intimate and quite small. And again, I've had peers of mine call me up and say, we're in the final phases of an RFP and it's between A and B. What do you think? And if B was in there with the trenches with me and went over and above and what have you, I'd be like, B did this and don't touch A with a barge pole. Notwithstanding that, people move and maybe the person that was the customer success manager at the time, which in itself sometimes is quite an ironic term, might have moved on. I've already been bitten, so and it's never again, because I can't afford to be bitten twice.
So I think what you're talking about there is like the culture. Because culture, one person doesn't make the culture, but they influence it, right? So that's you're looking for that real, that true partnership.
One person doesn't make the company, and it's the culture of the company. Absolutely right.
Yeah.
Absolutely right. And let's not focus on the negatives. Let's focus on the positives. And the positive. So to go back to your question, in terms of service management companies, where I've seen them be really successful is where they're true partners, where they do go the extra mile, where they say, there's this piece of thought leadership that we've just developed here. Have a look. What do you think? That engage you, that invite you to be, an advisor to the company. And I've had companies that initially we the path has been really, really rocky, but the recovery has been, let's engage with you more. Let's really understand your pain points, because I wouldn't be surprised if my pain points are also their other customers' pain points too.
Absolutely.
And seldom is one of us alone. There's a bit of a root cause there, and then there's companies that are really keen to understand that, and then there's other companies that just look at you and perceive you to be a cash cow or a number on a bottom line. And typically those relationships don't really last, as they do in life. If you have a friend and you're the guy that continually buys dinner and continually buys the round and they never put their hand in their pocket, well, has it suggest that friendship doesn't really last.
There's a shelf life
there, isn't there? If both of you are mutually supportive, if you're there in their time of need, you're there in he or she is there in your time of need, then that relationship goes on.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think what you're saying there, Stuart, just to paraphrase ever so slightly, that it's important that there's a very strong collaboration. It's not just give, but it's give and take, and that everybody kind of understands what's expected and what the outcomes need to be to have that harmony.
Combined with an element of common sense and flexibility. Because the worst thing someone can say to me during an incident is the contract says.
Yeah. I think that there's a really interesting point there, isn't there, around making sure that the desired outcomes that you want from that relationship are clear and take precedence over the process that is written down in the contract. You talked about, our SLA is X hours. Yeah, but that doesn't achieve the outcome, right? The outcome is that we need to resolve the incident.
Yeah, and most of these contracts were written, in kind of peacetime, and most of these contracts, you don't know what you don't know, and you don't know that, an update to an EDR solution is going to bring down a company system. Nobody envisaged that. And then suddenly you'll hear with this event that nobody envisaged. Well, it's outcome, it's partnership, it's mutual support
and flexibility. No, 100%. So Sunil, you've kind of chopped and changed the questions that we had planned for Stuart around here. I have no idea what's next. But,
I can ask the next one if you like.
All right,
Dan.
thank you. And all right,
sorry,
good.
Stuart. My apologies. So one of the things that we talked about in the run up to the podcast was your focus in and around neurodiversity and your sort of, I guess, celebration, right, of neurodiversity, particularly in your team and in your organization. So just tell us a bit more about that. How do you look for a way in which you can really harness the skills that, right, a neurodiverse team of people bring into the business?
Yeah. So first and foremost, my daughter's dyslexic, and for us, dyslexia is not a thing. For us, it's just the way our brains are wired, and it's the difference between having blonde hair or black hair or straight hair or curly hair.
Or no hair.
Yeah, I was going to say
Or
or
no
hair
hair.
at all, but
and so for me, first of all, I'm really comfortable in my neurodiversity. I don't think it's a thing. I don't think it's something that makes me lesser or makes my daughter lesser. It just makes us different. And it's understanding. So and then there's another couple of sort of optics that I have in my team. I'm very passionate about diversity and diversity of thought, because the very definition of insanity is doing the same thing time over time and expecting a different outcome. And what I love about having differing backgrounds, people, is that they bring a different point of view, and they help you see a problem in a different way. Specifically, well, I know that there's lots of different types of diversity. Let me focus on mine, and let me focus on neurodiversity. And for me, neurodiversity is really important, especially within the cybersecurity domain, because from personal experience, my dyslexia has allowed me to see incidents in a very different way to other people that aren't dyslexic. And part of my dyslexia draws me to looking at an incident sort of backwards and back to front, whereas the traditional incident response, you look at the kill chain and how it all started, and you look at the reconnaissance aspect, and you look at this and that and the other, up till the exfiltration and up till the detonation and away you go. But my dyslexia has helped me progress in some incidents a lot quicker, just because of the optic. That's one aspect. I also actively look out for and have in my past career recruited people who specifically neurodiverse people. And I found some of the neurodiverse attributes of people, for example, with ADHD, to be people that are brilliant at long, complex incidents, because they want to see something through, and they don't give up because there's something that they still haven't quite solved. And while other people, get fatigued, they are laser focused,
maintain that hyper focus. Yeah.
Hyper focused to see this till the end. And
yeah,
those people who have been in long incidents know how exhausting they can be. And one of the things that I noticed, having these, specifically this individual, is that then his hyper focus and his work ethic and his determination to see it through raised the other members of the team. And to put it in an analogy, if he was carrying the 50-kilo rucksack, well, I'm going to carry a 50-kilo rucksack. And if he's working 14 20-hour days, I'm working 14 to 20-hour days. And if it really was an example to all. So that's one side. And then the other side, if you think about one of the fundamentals of detection within cybersecurity, which is the presence of the abnormal and the absence of the normal. I've found in my career that neurodiverse people, especially those with conditions like Asperger's or autism, are very, very, very good at spotting the genesis of incidents, because I had an employee who, liked his, cup of coffee at 7:43, not 7:42, not 7:44, 43. And it was always from this same cup. And it was, change the cup and he wasn't happy. And, change the time and he wasn't happy. And go to his desk and move the, the little Star Wars figurine by an inch and he wasn't happy. But he was amazing at detecting behavioral anomaly of systems way, way quicker than anyone else could. So I guess, part of the answer is, get to know your team intimately, which you should do anyway as a good servant leader, and then play to people's strengths. And I look upon my dyslexia as a God-given gift. I do not feel any lesser for it. Now, get me to handwrite a 3,000-word policy document. I'm not your man.
Yeah.
And make it spelling free. I'm not your man. I genuinely am not. And take away spell check from my word, and I crumble. But play to my strengths and play to neurodiverse people's strengths, and you'll find them to be just amazing. And get to know your people, and you'll find, those little nuggets, and then promote, grow, develop, flourish those sort of nuggets of excellence. And I have to say, people that have been neurodiverse in my teams, you play David Raya in goal, you don't play him as a striker. And I found a ton of David Rayas.
As a footballer, Dan.
Thank you. I was wondering
who plays for Arsenal.
Okay, good. I'm not a big footy follower, but I'm sure everybody's listening probably knows more about that than I do. But that's a great point you make. It's about there's a lot of not to kind of get into too much detail, but you see these things like, oh, such and such isn't very good at maths, so we'll give him extra maths teaching, or she's not very good at whatever, and we'll give it's recognizing the strengths and then amplifying those, right? I think that's kind of what you're talking a little bit about there, Stuart, isn't it? I've got these strengths, let's use those to the best of their abilities, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And we've come on leaps and bounds from when I was at school, where I was just thick. And it was weird because I was thick because I couldn't write, but I was in all the top sets, and things weren't really
marry up.
Two and two weren't being, didn't make four. But now that, we have, diagnoses, and these conditions are well known, and then they're better understood. And again, one of the things is, to talk openly about it, and the kind of, the point of view. And it's a danger. Well, it's a really interesting thing, because I was speaking to a neurodiversity champion, who was saying, some people talk about neurodiversity as a superpower. And, when I was at school, it was very, very far from a superpower, because I struggled, in writing sentences and doing mathematical problems, mental arithmetic. There comes a point when my mind just goes blank and foggy. And therefore that whole aspect of, that you'll have some neurodiversity advocates that say neurodiversity is a superpower, and then you'll have other neurodiversity advocates that say it very much isn't. Where I land on this is that it's just something that's different. It's just the way God made me, and I'm privileged to be the way I am. I'm very blessed to be who I am, and dyslexia is part of it. And that's great because, you know, when life gives you melons.
I think
make melonade.
Yeah, make melonade.
It's great just to touch on that as well. You know, there's a much broader awareness. You know, the fact, as you just said, Stuart, you know, people talk very openly about this, and it's very different to, as you say, you know, when we were at school, it was a very different world back then. Certainly. Sunil, sorry, I cut across you there.
No, I mean, this is not a politics show in any way, right? But I am so pleased that we're able to have a really open conversation like this, because there are some parts of the world at the moment that seem to be perhaps taking a slightly different view
approach,
of diversity. So, you know, it's great to be able to have such an open conversation and to see so much success, right, out of celebrating people's differences, right? So very good. Dan,
it all brings it all. Sorry, and just to put a full stop on the whole thing, you know, it all brings just that little difference in perspective and point of view, and it's like, you know, making food without salt and pepper and chilies and what have you. It's all that little difference that makes things richer and better.
Yep. Adds the flavor. Sunil.
Well, I was going to say, Dan, so we have come perhaps to the last question, so over to you.
Sure thing. So let's just change topics slightly, well, drastically, let's argue. Let's talk a bit about the future. You know, we've seen in 2024 and now into 2025, AI has come along leaps and bounds, and all of the great things that brings along with it, alongside kind of automation, which has been around a bit longer. But AI and automation, you can't kind of look at LinkedIn or any kind of social tech feeds without seeing somebody extolling something else or other about AI. Massive opportunity there. You know, within the service management space, we're hearing lots about agentic AI and clever things that it can be doing there. Huge opportunity. But then on the flip side of that, massive kind of risk potentially. You know, Sunil's just touched on a certain part of the world, which we'll go unmentioned, where free speech and social media is kind of throwing out the guardrails on that for whatever reason. And very keen to sort of hear your views, Stu, on what you think, one, with those kind of components, AI and automation and so forth, how that's going to be kind of impactful potentially in the security operations, and maybe some thoughts on kind of how what strategies you might be looking to employ to prevent against that. You know, we talked a bit about phishing and things, and that social engineering, I guess, is where that sort of falls into. Very keen to sort of hear your thoughts on what lies ahead.
So, you know, my first thought is that none of this is new. And I think, depending on how you skin this particular cat, arguments can be made that, you know, AI has been with us since, you know, the latter end of the Second World War, you know, early end of the post-war era. So AI is nothing new. The newness is I guess the generative aspect, maybe, and B, that it's now super publicly accessible. But if you think about, you know, the initial nervousness about AI as being this new thing that's going to, you know, Skynet is coming. It's been here, and has been, you know, widely used, you know, within companies for some time now, especially if you think about machine learning and whatnot. The interesting thing for me about AI is there's a couple of really interesting things. I do not believe that it is the sort of the silver bullet that some people, you know, make it out to be. At the end of the day, AI is kind of like a child, and if I treat my child to be a certain way, that's how it'll grow up. And if I treat my child and grow my child a certain way, then they'll be like that. So what I mean is, you know, ask AI to show you a picture of the most beautiful human being in the world, and it'll look how the model was taught
Yeah.
to think. So there's really interesting dynamics. As someone who always looks from a hacker's point of view, the first thing I think about AI is how can I poison the model, and how can I trick the model, and these sort of things, which again, from a security point of view, you need to think about that, combined with, you know, the fact that, you know, nothing in life is free. So you have all these free AI applications that ask you, you know, you put questions in, but that's just putting your data in, and then there's some work, you know, there's some companies that have come to, you know, significant data loss because they've put in things into AI models that they shouldn't have, and then that becomes open source, and then that becomes part of the thing. So there's also an aspect of control that is very kind of needed, you know, for AI. On the flip side, before we even talk about security, we use it, and my team uses it a lot. So the bot that I told you about that was named earlier in the conversation, that's a great aspect of it. And we have a massive automation drive here in security at VMO2, because I want, you know, my analysts to do really interesting things and to think about things that really shift the needle, as opposed to, you know, copying one spreadsheet from this system to another system, or sending an email due to, you know, this breach or this thing that they're investigating to this line manager. And do you see what I mean? All of that can be automated, and I can really focus my analysts on threat hunting, on the latest you know, tactics, techniques, and the like. And then of course that's when AI becomes interesting, because you can then utilize it to then support that threat hunting, to learn, to complement. So I think in terms of security, I think AI will be really important as a complementary tool, as opposed to a tool or something that will make us all redundant. I don't believe that for 1 second, because I still think that you need a human to analyze with experience, that has had a number of shovels in the face, that understands nuances that I don't believe AI currently is anywhere near, you know. And that's not even talking about, you know, the hallucinations that some AI models have and all of that other stuff. And then when it comes to AI being used for nefarious reasons and AI being used for good, I you know, I like to think, so I started my career in the army, and I started as a tank commander. And again, that was very interesting, because you developed a piece of armor, and then you also developed a kinetic weapon that defeated that piece of armor, and then you then had reactive armor which exploded in front of the kinetic weapon, which then defeated that, and then you had little pieces of explosives that detonated the reactive armor, that then allowed the kinetic projectile to go through. And you know, there was a sort of a technology race, not an arms race, but you know, technology race of attack and defend, and that's, you know, that's where we're going to be, because AI is as available to well, with limitations, but as available to one side as it is to the other. It's not that one specific side has dominance. Now you can argue about, you know, nation states and national security, and then, you know, deeper parts of AI, but at the end of the day, you know, what we're in as cybersecurity professionals, you know, kind of focused on is, you know, the criminals, and you know, the sort of the organized crime groups, and protecting from opportunists and that sort of thing, and getting the basics right. And if you do that, you're well on your way.
It's quite, I mean, it's really fascinating hearing you talk about that, Stuart, because a few things to me stand out. One is that in terms of some of the sort of benefits that your team can harness from AI, they're very similar outcomes to any other part of the business organization, right? People can lose some of the mundane, repetitive tasks, right? People are able to communicate potentially better in a more, potentially quicker way. They are able to focus their efforts on really harnessing their experience and their knowledge to drive improvements, and your customers ultimately get a better experience, whatever that looks like for them. And then when you talk about I mean, you said it's not an arms race, but it sounds a little bit in some ways like an arms race. But that actually that's also the same as a business looking at AI as a competitive advantage over other players in their market space. If you can get a piece of technology to give you an edge, then you win more market share, or you win more customers, or you drive more profit up, or whatever the outcome is. And in fact, you're describing a very similar sort of competitive field there. Can you use the technology in a way that prevents bad actors from leveraging it to cause you damage?
No, and I think that's exactly, in perhaps maybe a rather verbose way of saying it. No, absolutely. It is just that. And initially AI and automation is looked within teams with suspicion. And I'm very firmly of the view that we have the privilege of having some really skilled cybersecurity professionals here at Virgin Media O2, and I want them to be intellectually challenged and go for those really knotty problems that require them to really focus and remove all them and all the mundane aspects of it. If you look at it in all my whether it's in my GRC function or my business my BSOS function, or whether it's in my SOC or it's my security engineering, whatever, I want these people to think, let's put this in a sandbox and try it. Let's do this, not let's move the spreadsheet from A to B, or let's send this email to this manager saying, did you know that this happened? Or let's sort of automate it, all that. Because I think at the end of the day, then with my team growing and developing and driving that curiosity and driving that thirst for knowledge, and then being empowered to take intelligent risks, we're more secure, my customers are more secure, and we're doing the right things.
Yeah.
No, fantastic. Thank you ever so much, Stuart. To all our listeners, I hope you found that very insightful and interesting, as we have. And I think we've run over slightly what we anticipated for this session. Stuart, again, thank you ever so much for taking time out today to join us, and be good to have you back sometime.
Would love to. Thank you for having me. Really enjoyed chatting with you both.
Yeah, thank you, Stuart.
Pleasure's all mine.